Welcome back to the Cream City Club podcast. I'm Spencer Michaelis, and I'm here as always with Gunnar Amelunk. Gunnar, how you doing tonight? Besides, the Bucks and depression and sadness and all that stuff. Otherwise, how you doing?
Yeah, that's exactly how I'm feeling. I was talking with you beforehand, and that's why you stole the words right out of my mouth, Spencer. I'm feeling quite depressed, but on the other hand, the Brewers are pretty hot right now. At least got off to a good start this year, so should be feeling pretty good in that sense. So how are you feeling?
Yeah, I didn't have to watch the Bucks game, so I feel probably not as bad as you do right now, but definitely not the highest, not the best feeling I've ever had, I guess, in terms of happiness, but it's not terrible. It's not terrible. Like we said, the Brewers just got started and we're going to talk about them tonight. So before we do that, if you're listening and you haven't yet subscribed, please take a moment to do so on whatever platform you are on and rate us 5 stars. Follow us on Twitter at the Cream City Pod to stay up to date on these episode releases. And today is going to be our first in-season Brewers focused episode. So Gunnar, what do we got?
We got mostly positive injury updates to give you guys, as well as obviously going over our first 5 games this season. And then we're going to be talking about Pat Murphy as a manager. What do we like? What don't we like? Everything that we've seen from him so far. And then our way too early, maybe over dramatized reactions to how the players have performed so far and who's kind of caught our eye in these first 5 games. So. First, with those injury updates, Spencer, I guess I'll toss it to you because there's some big picture ones here. First, starting with Robert Gasser, I think he's on track now to be, it's a lot positive. It seems like a lot more positive than we thought. He should be returning back mid-April. How are you feeling with Robert Gasser? Do you expect him to be up soon-ish, or what's kind of the timeline you're imagining now for Robert Gasser?
Yeah, honestly, I know it was a bone spur in his elbow, so that's always a little. Any elbow stuff is concerning. Obviously, it's different than a ligament, so it's not a huge deal, but you never know how quickly that can kind of be figured out. Um, I was not expecting to hear that it was only going to be probably a couple more weeks, so that was very good news in my opinion. I think we're going to see him, and if he's healthy and he's able to get back to where he was uh, right before the injury in spring when he was looking pretty good. I would imagine we're going to see him by mid-May at the latest. There's going to be a lot of stretches of baseball where the Brewers have very few off days. They're going to want an extra starter at times, and he's right on the precipice of MLB, so he's ready to go. And I'd imagine he'd be, I mean, Murph basically said before this injury that he was going to be up in April at one point. I don't know if that happens now. Maybe it gets pushed back a little bit, but we're going to see him pretty soon. So that was definitely good news. In another left-handed starting pitcher injury news, Wade Miley is going to be, I believe, Friday. He's making a rehab start for Nashville. It sounded like they weren't sure 100% if he would be able to go one rehab start in Nashville and then back with the Brewers, or if it would be two. But we should be seeing him probably around mid-April as well. So getting getting some of the depth back, and we'll talk about why it's going to be important to have this starting depth a little bit later when we talk about some of the bullpen management and all that stuff that the Brewers are going to have to deal with this year. But in terms of position play, well, we got one more pitcher I should talk about. Trevor Megill, we learned today, went on the IL with a concussion. Pretty weird story and unfortunate story, but I guess he ended up having food poisoning in New York. And then when he came back to Milwaukee on their off day, he was at a store and I'm sure he was dehydrated or something because of all the loss of fluids and ended up passing out. And he smacked his head hard enough where it jolted him enough that he ended up with a concussion. So, a very weird way to get a concussion. Um, Hopefully, everything will be fine. It'll be a short lived, I mean, it's a 7 day IL for concussions. So, he could be back within about a week if everything goes well. I do know that I was at the opening day game and he was warming up for like a minute. So I wonder if they caught these symptoms like while he was warming up, because otherwise I think they would have done it before that game and tried to get some extra pitching depth up right away. But it must have been caught during that game. So weird situation, but hopefully it, like I said, it's a short-lived stay and everything checks out fine in a week. But of course, he was looking pretty good to start the year. So unfortunate to lose him for a little bit here. And then on the position player side, Garrett Mitchell, his broken finger is healing correctly. It's not out of place at all in terms of the way it's healing. So he's on pace still for the 4 to 6 weeks or so that are remaining on his timetable. So that's good news too. Like you said, it's mostly all good news except for Megill's concussion. Hopefully, I mean, there's going to be injuries and stuff, but hopefully we keep getting good news. I guess the one we didn't talk about is Jefferson Quero. We don't fully know what's happening with that, but the first news that came out is that he dislocated the shoulder, but that nothing their first initial images show no tears or anything, which is good news. They did say that it's still pretty inflamed, so they're going to do more MRI. They're going to do another MRI once the inflammation goes down. So I suppose we're not fully out of the water on that yet, but it's a good it's good news in general. Now, it a dislocated shoulder can be a recurring problem, so you're hoping that that's not the case. I was looking at some of the more recent, like Esturi Ruiz, actually, ironically, last year had a very, very similar injury. He dislocated his right shoulder diving back into first. He didn't tear anything. He was out for about a month, and then he was fine. So if that's all it is, then we dodged a big bullet with Quero because it would be rough to lose him any tear, and you're not seeing him again this year. So hopefully that's all it is. We'll update, I guess, once we get the full story on he gets the second imaging session done. But hopefully the initial news sounds like we may have avoided the worst. So knock on wood, hopefully that's what happens. But moving past the injuries, we've got 5 games to talk about, Gunnar. We haven't been able to talk about we
Hmm.
started this the day Craig Counsell made his decision. That was our first podcast, and we haven't talked about a game yet. So we'll dive into the first series of the season first. So the sweep of the Mets, 3 game series. Obviously, opening day got delayed a day, so it's just Friday through Sunday. Game one, Freddie Peralta absolutely shoves. He gave up 1 hit, happened to be a home run to Starling Marte, but 8 strikeouts. I mean, he was unbelievably good. Brewers pull out a 3-1 win. The pen did not allow any hits in their 3 innings, so it ended up being a full team one hitter. Um, Obviously, we had a Yelich home run. We had Jackson Chourio's first hit. And then there were some fireworks later in the game as well on a certain play at second base. But Gunnar, we'll talk about that in a minute. What did you notice in game one? What did you take away? I mean, for me, my main one was Freddie just looked really, really good, and that was very exciting to see.
Yeah, I mean, it was everything you just said were the highlights. Freddie too, it felt like he went deep in that game, knowing how the rest of our starters have gone these last 5 games, and he only went 6 innings. So, absolutely shoved, like you said, 1 hit. They hit the ball pretty decently throughout the game. It wasn't like crazy, but it felt like at the end of the game, like, oh, they only got 1 hit today. That was weird. Didn't feel like it totally, but Yelich potentially back. We'll talk about that through these 5 games. Absolutely sticking so far. I think that was his first opening day home run since 2019. I know we had our old jerseys and it had to be so. Not that it means entirely a lot, but good to see that he got off to a hot start on a cold day in New York. That can't be an easy one to hit a home run on a low line drive like that out to right center.
Off a lefty.
Yeah, and that too. Yeah, for sure. And then Jackson's first, he got all of his hits out of the way, RBIs, stolen base. He got it all out of the way in the first day. So, definitely good to see out of that. And then, yeah, I mean, we could slide right into that Rhys drama quickly here. I know it's kind of old news at this point, a week later, but, um, yeah, I mean, Rhys takes a legal slide late under the bag for sure. Um, and right into Jeff McNeil, who they have some history, of course, with the Mets in general. He claims they've had some history between the two of them on slides before. Someone put like a compilation up of the slides. I didn't see much of anything. It looked like normal baseball to me, but I guess maybe there are some things when you're on the field that might be a little bit different vibe. But yeah, for me, the slide in general, I I think clearly Rhys did his job. If you bobbled the ball and you're made a legal slide, now like I said, I totally get it as a late slide. I even get a little bit of frustration. I mean, those are risky injury type things. Like no one wants their leg taken out from the side. I get that as well. But I think it was just a lot of overreaction on his part for sure. And I didn't think it caused that much of a stir. And obviously, we got a little bit of fireworks the next day because of it. But Spencer, what did you think of the actual slide itself? I'm sure you're in the same boat, but
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it was late. And it definitely, you could see McNeil's leg kind of fold. So whenever that happens, I'm sure, well, I know it's a scary feeling for a split second. Like you almost lose control of your leg when that happens because it just kind of collapses on you. But when you get up and nothing hurts, like you can have your initial reaction. Like McNeil immediately overreacted to it by getting up, standing over him, pointing at him, and just screaming at him multiple times. And to Rhys's credit, and I don't know, this was part of the story, but I feel like Rhys couldn't have handled things much better in terms of he let McNeil get that out of his system, didn't say a word to him, and turned around and started jogging off the field. And then McNeil just kept going after him. So then eventually, when the Brewers jump out of the dugout, yeah, Rhys
Hmm.
now starts talking a little bit. But some people I saw, and this is just sports fans and meatheads, really, but people who are calling Rhys soft for not going back at McNeil. Like, what do you want him to do? And that he should just square up because a dude started yelling at him about this? Like, no. First of all, that's going to hurt the Brewers and the team if he gets in a fight and gets suspended. There are certain moments where, yeah, if Jeff McNeil like uppercut him in the face, I would understand Rhys turning around and continuing to fight or something. Jeff McNeil yelling at him does not invoke any reason to start fighting the guy. And then they kept saying, like, well, he didn't talk to him until he was off the field. Yeah, because Rhys thought it was over when he started running off the field until McNeil just kept talking and yelling. And I did think it was hilarious when they go to replay. McNeil is seeing the replay, screaming at Rhys, like, you think that's okay? And Rhys just goes, I'm allowed to slide. Like, I'm allowed to slide. And then they call it a legal slide, and everybody's now what's McNeil going to say? Like, you don't have much of a leg to stand on anymore. The compilation that you talked about was funny. It was five different times that Hoskins slid into second base on a double play opportunity. Only once did McNeil actually turn two.
Right.
And the top reply to the tweet was just, it seems that this may be more of a Jeff McNeil problem than a Rhys Hoskins problem because he, I mean, he looked bad on all of them. It really seemed like he was probably more frustrated that he couldn't even get a throw off and that he bobbled the ball and then he took some of it out on Rhys. But it was, we'll talk about the next game and all that happened after that too. But it was at least entertaining. And well, we didn't even talk about the Rhys reaction that got everybody talking, which was the cry baby
Oh yeah, for
wah
sure.
signal towards him. I mean, that was great. I mean, that's I love that because that's what McNeil was doing. He was just crying at that point. Like
Hmm.
it was pretty. At some point, he needed to let it go, and he was refusing to let it go. So then, at that point, yeah, he earned a little bit of a crybaby sign towards him. But it was fun. I mean, for game one, when you get that type of like heated moment on opening day. You don't get that very often. You don't see benches out of the dugout very often on opening day. So some uh some excitement, at least in that regard. And then get to the ninth, you got Abner Uribe's second save of his MLB career. And just, I mean, that was just a really good baseball game. Honestly, the Brewers just played a really
Hmm.
solid game all around. They played good defense. Going to be a theme that we talk about here. The defense has been absolutely absurd through five games. It's been unbelievably good.
Yeah.
Um,
The one note I should say though before we move on for this game, because we're going to talk about coaching later, was we saw Sal sit for Blake Perkins. Do you agree with now we know kind of what happened later, these five games, and maybe it wasn't fully the case, but something that we talked about last time on the Brewers podcast that we did was not going full platoon all the time. We did face a lefty in Jose Quintana. We were like, well, maybe he'll actually just play Sal anyways because he's earned it. He's a really good player, and he's gonna have to play through it at some point, hopefully. But we did go with Blake Perkins over Sal Frelick. Um, Obviously, we've already sort of talked about it, but now that it happened, did you agree with that decision on opening day to go with the guy who's probably not going to play every day normally to sit Sal over a lefty?
yeah, I mean, I don't mind it. I don't hate it. I, I should say, like, I like Blake Perkins a lot more than most people, I think. I don't think he's a great hitter. I don't think he's ever going to be mashing against lefties. But at the very least, you're getting very, very good defense, good base running, speed, the same things you're getting from Frelick, but you're also getting it with maybe I mean, I would say Blake Perkins is a lot more likely to have extra base hits against a lefty than a guy like Frelick is. Um, I think both of them could probably single their way to a few hits in a game or something if they're having a good game against the lefty. But I don't see Sal as someone very likely to be able to turn on or hit for power against lefties. So I don't mind it. I hope eventually that Sal proves that he can hit lefties and that he gets chances against lefties. And we'll talk about it for this last game that just happened when we get to it. But Murph did prove that he is basing it more on the pitch type and the way that pitchers pitch than just straight platoon. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. But I don't hate it. I don't mind it. But it's hopefully long term, they'll allow Sal to be an everyday player to
Yeah,
the
I agree.
real extent of what that means. But yeah, we can talk about game two then, because I was excited for this one. We I've been wanting to see DL Hall pretty badly. I His line ends up looking fine. Like it was not good, but 4 innings pitched, 2 earned runs. Not a great outing, but he kept the Brewers in the game while he was struggling. Like the command was bad. He I remember at one point the Bally Sports duo going, his command's been great. He's throwing tons of strikes, and it's like it it's a thing that I have a pet peeve with. To me, command means you're throwing pitches where you want to. Control, on the other hand, is throwing strikes to me. Like those are two different things in my head. That's how, like when I talk about pitching prospects, that's how I break down. Like there's two different grades for me. If I were giving out grades, there's a control grade and a command grade. And a guy like DL Hall right now, or in that game, I would have given him like a 55 on control and like a 25-30 on command. Like he couldn't throw anything where he wanted to, but he was ending up in the zone a lot. In the end, that's not very productive because you end up getting hit when your pitches are just thrown in the zone consistently. And I mean, one strikeout for a guy like Hall, not ideal. His velocity was lower than I was expecting. Now, Murph hinted at it yesterday on opening day, home opener, in his press conference. He seemed to think that he was kind of overthrowing and trying to do too much. And sometimes when you're trying to do too much and throw hard, you actually choke the ball and throw a little bit softer. He also didn't have the exact same shape that he'd been getting on the fastball. It had a little less ride. So another thing that could happen if you're choking the ball. DL Hall talked about after the game, it kind of felt like his major league debut again. And it was only his second start at the major league level. And his first start was his major league debut. It was his first appearance with the Brewers, new team, new role. Like it wasn't great, but the fact that he kept the team in it while he was struggling is a pretty good sign of a guy who knows how to at least battle through a start. Something that a lot of the good Brewers pitchers have done over the years is avoid a complete blow up, even if they don't have their A or B or C stuff. So you saw flashes. He threw some really good sliders to like Brandon Nimmo in an at bat. I think it was his only strikeout actually, but he threw a couple good changeups to righties. The fastball, you could see the life it gets on it still because it was 91, 92, and it was still getting a lot of foul balls, like late foul balls, but he wasn't getting many whiffs. And he's going to be a guy who gets whiffs. So definitely, I would say a bit of a disappointment for me because I was kind of hoping he would just come out firing and have a really good game. But I also saw some things that are a sign of somebody who knows how to battle through not having their best stuff. And that's a really good thing for any pitcher to have the ability to do. So, Gunnar, did you have anything on Hall or on anything outside? We'll talk about Hoskins in a second, but anything outside
Mhm.
of Hoskins and that whole thing from this game?
Yeah, with Hall first, I think everything you said I agree with. It's something that we're very accustomed to, and maybe it's me being a baby, but I was not a fan of playing in the cold weather, and I also know seeing some of our pitchers that we know, velocity is usually down in the cold
Oh
weather,
yeah.
which again could be an excuse, but I get it. And like you said, he battled through all of that and was still able to put out a quality start. Now he only went 4 innings, so it's not technically a quality start, but I guess I just noticed too with that it probably goes along to what you're saying as well as it felt like he was getting in good counts, but he just could not get that last location, that last pitch that he needed to get those whiffs. That was the last bit, like little piece he was missing, which again could be the cold weather, whatever the case may be. But I felt like he was right there. And again, the nerves and everything else, you got to account for that as well. It's like he said, it's basically like his first start all over again. Anyone would be nervous for that. I guess the other thing I should say, Bryce Turang, we got to give him a shout out here. This was his first. He had a good. I mean, I guess he didn't play really on opening day, but this was his first showing. Three stolen bases today, a couple hits. Today being the second game of the year. Um, and this is what we said. If he can get on base, he's going to steal. We clearly trying to run this year. That's going to be a thing for us, and around the big leagues, really, that's a thing now. But definitely have to give him his credit. We've seen that all through 5 games that he loves hitting in the first week of the season, I guess. So his first week numbers are Hall of Fame numbers if he can just do that the rest of his career. But um, yeah, like I said, if he's hitting and he's getting on base, he's going to do a lot of good things in his defense. I think he had the good play in this one too late, or it was at the end of the game one.
It was
They
game
had it.
one. He came
Yeah,
in for
that's what
defense
I'm
in game
thinking
one,
of. Okay, yeah.
and he made a really good play up the middle on a
Hmm.
ground ball.
And that was
And
big too.
oh yeah, it was huge. It would have been a leadoff single, I think, in that inning. So it was a really big play.
Yep.
You know,
And then, yeah, I mean, sliding right into the Rhys part of the day, which was the biggest one. I think he had 3 hits in this one.
yep.
And what caught all the fireworks was when he hit the home run finally. He started out with a double or a single down the line that I thought could have been a double, but he's not running super well right now, but at all. And that was shown in the first opening day. He had a grounder to third base that could have scored a run, and he just did not move well at all down the line. But of course, the ACL, nursing it, whatever the case may be, he probably doesn't run fast anyways. But regardless, moving on, he hit a home run, nice one. Later in the game, they throw behind him. Fast forward. Um, Funny note with that is right before that happened, Pat Murphy, they showed a nice clip of him whispering in his ear, potentially warning him of something that might happen. We talked about it and said maybe he was saying like, look, we need you. Don't do anything stupid. This is probably what they're going to do. They can't get you out. They're down, might have been like 6-1 at that point, I want to say. Well, it would have been after the home run. So yeah, it had to be. Um, and this is probably the time they're going to do it, unfortunately. And sure enough, they do it. Um, and th Weirdly enough, in that play, guy moved on to second base. I don't remember who was on first base, but the pitcher immediately runs up to Rhys like he's expecting a fight. And Rhys is just staring at him like, oh, like I'm not gonna do anything, but this is very fishy already. Um, so yeah, I mean, I'm glad he didn't react much like the first day where he didn't react. This is showing a lot of maturity out of him. I saw a lot of people saying, which I agree with, that this we definitely have a little bit more of a toughness to us this season. It feels like a little more grit. Um, and we're gonna probably, positive we're gonna be mentioning this theme later on, but a lot of people are tying that to Craig Counsell's teams and saying how we had no fight in us and we had no grit, and this was, and maybe that was the case. I just don't see how those two things are tied. I hope that we have toughness and grit like we should anyways, but I just don't think that's necessarily tied to a Craig Counsell versus Pat Murphy thing. And Pat, he's gonna bring it to, like, that's probably Pat Murphy's like thing, like hard baseball. Like, but I also think if that's the case, I don't know if Pat would have been very mature in the fact of saying like, Rhys, calm down, like this is what we're doing. And he defended his guy. He came out and yelled at the pitcher, yelled at the umpire, and got him thrown out, whatever. But um, I think that's going to be a topic, and we've seen it over these 5 games. So the differences between him and Craig, and the team wise, and how they're constructed, and how they're acting, and everything else. They're reading into everything right now. But I guess I'm getting off track now. But with the Rhys, he had a huge day, and answered back pretty well to that opening day. So what did you think of Rhys Hoskins and that whole scenario?
Yeah, I mean the 2-run homer immediately into a bat drop with a little stare into their dugout, like that was, how do you not love that? He didn't cross any lines with it or anything, but he clearly made a point to say like, yeah, you can be upset with me. I'm going to keep beating you. And honestly, the way they did it is the whole thing was just wrong. I First of all, to be very clear here, I don't think anyone should ever hit anybody on purpose. I really don't. I would never, as a coach, I would never have my players do that. If you're going to do it, you do not throw it up around the neck height. Like you just don't. It's got to be lower. Two, you don't do it after he's gone 3 for 3 with 4 RBIs, 4 RBI. That's for Michael Barnes. It's already a plural. But it's it was just they did everything wrong. And like Rhys said after the game, they can say it wasn't on purpose, but major league pitchers don't miss by 8 feet.
Yeah.
And luckily he had bad control because, or command, because he would have hit Rhys pretty high up if he actually had hit him there. So they handled it wrong. It was good to see that Rhys, again, like you said, handled it correctly. And basically at one point even said, like you could see him mouthing, like pointing to his head, like no, and then pointing like down to his
Hmm.
hip, like if you're gonna hit me, you hit me down here. Like there's no reason to be up that high with it. I
Baseball
think
is
what
just
you
so weird in that sense. As a pitcher, saying that I can't beat you, basically, I'm admitting I can't beat you. So I'm
yeah,
just going to throw at your head because I'm admitting that I can't beat you and you're annoying me.
yeah,
Just try to strike him out and shove it in his face that way.
correct. That's how I would always view it as a pitcher. Listen, if you as a pitcher, if you go deep against me, if you do something like good for you, now I'm going to try and get you out because I don't want you to do that again.
Hmm.
And I'm not going to give you a free base. Why am I doing that? That's not helping anything. That's making things worse for my team and for me. I never once understood it, but I know it's the old school baseball thing that people feel like they're protecting their own team, but sorry, you protected Jeff McNeil from nothing, from absolutely nothing. Um, yeah, that we'll be done with that. I thought the Brewers handled it perfectly. I love that they didn't retaliate. I'm glad. I hope they don't when we play them again. Hope it's not some crap that carries over to the next series against the Mets. Um, but I was really happy with how Rhys and the Brewers and everybody handled it. So then we go to the ninth of that one, and it was a 2-run game after Hobie and Bryce Wilson tried to make it a game again with Bryce giving up 2 singles and Hobie coming in and getting absolutely first pitch fastball just destroyed by Brett Beatty. Abner came in, got the first 2 outs, correct? No, the first out. Was
Hmm.
Alonso with 2 outs or one? I don't know. Pete Alonso came up. He took a 100-mile-per-hour fastball on the outside corner and turned it around and hit it to left at 113 miles per hour for a homer. Like, I don't even know what you do with that. That's just ridiculous. Now, it wasn't a great pitch. It wasn't where it was supposed to be or anything, but to be able to turn around 100 on the outside corner and hit it 113 to the left field side, like, that was ridiculous. He's got insane power. The thing for me that was most important to see though was Abner not freaking out about that. Like that's been one of my concerns with him. Always will be. That was the first home run he gave up in MLB actually as well. So it'd be easy for him to be like, "Uh-oh, like now my stuff's not playing. I'm going to start picking around the edge of the zones here and starting to walk people or doing whatever." He didn't. He just came right back and started attacking again. I don't remember if Alonso was 1 or 2 outs, but he ended up striking out Starling Marte to end the game, gave the nice holster of the gun into his back pocket while staring at the Mets, said a few words to the Mets, and then when the Mets talked back, he turned and he shushed them. And he is, I mean, Kurt Hogue has tweeted it for years now since he was in the minors, but Abner is must see TV every time he's out there. You're either going to watch him chuck 100 plus miles per hour on the fastball with movement, with ridiculous movement, nasty slider. He's going to do something. It might not be a good thing for the Brewers, but he might freak out and do something very entertaining. He, uh, he might just start losing command, which can be entertaining for anyone who's not a Brewers fan as well, because he's chucking 103 to the backstop. But for the most part, what you're seeing is a guy who wears every emotion on his sleeve and pitches as hard as he possibly can and with as much conviction as he can. And he's very easy to root for, especially since he's on our team. Um, it was cool to see him immediately convert 2 saves in his 2 opportunities. Now, I think his ERA was whatever 4.5 after that because of the homer, but he pitched well in both of them. He had good command. He didn't walk people. He was in the zone and around the zone, and he looked really good in both of them. So that was great to see. And then for game 3 of the series, we got a Colin Ray special. He did exactly what Colin Ray does, which is limiting runs while getting you 5-ish innings usually, and nothing insanely special. He'll get out of some jams, but the guy just keeps you in games every time he pitches, it seems like. And we got a Jackson Chourio RBI double, his first extra base hit. Little look, I think it was a cutter, kind of stayed middle, and he just hit it to right field off the base of the fence. Might have been gone in the AmFam little Miller Park or the whatever the beer pen is now, whatever they call it. Um, but that was kind of a sign of like he almost inside outed that off the fence in right. He just has ridiculous power to the opposite field, which we saw in the Twin series. But the other headliner on offense in that one was William Contreras having two doubles, including an RBI. Maybe both were RBI. Either way, that was just another one where it was just really good game. And Brian Hudson comes in and makes his Brewers debut and just shoves for 3 innings. I mean, he looked unbelievably good. Four strikeouts. Um, the dude is very tall and he's getting extension of like 8 feet, which is not, I mean, nobody does that. A couple people got 8 feet last year on some of their fastballs, but he did it for almost his entire outing with his fastballs, and he looked fantastic. The slider looked really good. The fastball looked great. He Brewers might have got a really, really nice pickup in that one. I think he's going to have a really, really strong season. So, Gunnar, anything you saw in Game 3 that you want to talk about?
Ironically, it was a pitcher that Brian Hudson is who I wanted to bring up. I know we've talked about it in the past with him when we first got him, but I completely forgot he was a starter in his past. So I was like, how the hell did we get 3 innings out of Brian Hudson today? Um, and we're gonna have bullpen discussions, of course, of all these 5 games, but taking care of 3 innings with starters who aren't going deep into games necessarily. We're not even in the best of shape after these 5 games, but imagine if Brian Hudson can take care of 3 innings shoving.
Yeah.
So that was huge, turning it over into these next couple of games. So, yeah, I mean, William got hot. Obviously, you mentioned his two doubles. I think that might have turned the page for him a little bit, at least seeing some hits down and hits that we're used to him seeing out of him. And that got him going, of course. And then, yeah, I mean, Bryce Turang, I have to mention it again. He is still staying hot throughout that whole series with a couple more hits. So,
Yep.
yeah, pretty
Another
much all my
stolen base,
notes.
too.
Yep. What's the count now at this point? If it's 4 stolen bases through 3 games,
Yep. And he only
um,
played two. He only played
yeah,
in two of them.
true. Two in an inning. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's a decent pace, some would say, if you are averaging two a game. Yeah, the only other thing in that one is Yelich also had two stolen bases, which it's good to see him running. Um, he
Hmm.
just looks very comfortable right now, and I hope that stays the case because when he's running and he's hitting for power to the pull side, like those are the best signs that Yelich is feeling comfortable. And so far, he's doing both of them. So yeah, I mean, sweeping the Mets on the road to open the season, never a bad thing. Pretty enjoyable. Um, but yeah, then we move into this Twin series. So a series that always feels pretty competitive. I feel like there's a lot of close games whenever we play the Twins, and opening day ended up being another one of those. So 3-2 win. Nice way to get a home opener going. But Gunnar, what did you see in that game?
First we got Christian Yelich officially back. This absolutely crushing one to center field. Loving his swing right now. And we got our first look at Jacob Eunice, or Junis, sorry, I'm not sure. It's gonna go back and forth all year. But he looked good through 4 innings. You wonder how long the leash was even coming into it, how long he was gonna go, but another short start for our starters with only 4 innings. Elvis Peguero comes in, looked really, really good to me. Obviously, I'm not the pitching guy, but I even texted you. I noticed how good he looked. Picking him up with another multiple inning bullpen relief, which is good to see out of our guys. And even with them building up, I noticed too. I mean, if those guys can throw multiple innings, we talked about like a 2018 type of roster bullpen wise. If they can do that, that's playing right into what we can do with all of our tools in our pen. Um, I've mentioned him a lot now, of course. This is my nightmare scenario, Spencer, of not
It's our penance.
talking about Bryce Turang. I knew this was going to happen, but he's doing his thing. A couple more hits today, or in that one, the first one of this twin series. And hitters wise, I don't want to tip my hand a little bit too much yet, but I will say this was the first one I noticed where Sal looked a little iffy to me, and it's just I was getting a little bit of bad vibes watching him. But again, super early. I'm not saying he's bad or anything. I just was a little bit concerned with what I was seeing out of him. Oliver Dunn, I think, is the other hitter I wanted to mention, where going, if you count all those first 3 games in which we saw him periodically throughout this, and then in this game, really good swings on even his outs. It seems like he was having loud outs, a little bit of bad luck too. Um, Exit velocity was up, which is what we expect out of Oliver Dunn. You wanted to see him hit it more in the air, so he doesn't get that bad luck necessarily, but hitting really good and even made some defensive plays. I think now I'm backtracking to that Mets series, but probably something we should have mentioned was his defense at third base.
Yeah.
Um, I know you talked about his arm in the past, saying that it wasn't as bad, and I forgot about that conversation. Even so, I texted you. I'm like, his arm, you can tell it's not amazing, but totally fine for a third base. Again, in that cold weather too, it just seemed, super deep into the hole to his left, backtracking a little bit on his feet, and still made some really good plays. So if he can man third base and hit really well, he's going to start a conversation once Mitchell and that comes back, which is a whole nother big conversation that we could have later. But was definitely impressed with him. But yeah, out of those guys, Spencer, did you know anything else?
No, I mean Dunn's like diving, stabbing play he made was ridiculous. I was in the bleachers for the game, so it was hard to tell if he got like a actual good jump or if it was a Luis Urias type of great play where he only had to dive because he can't read the ball off the bat at all.
Yeah.
Seeing the replay, he did like he couldn't have got to the ball with any slight hesitation. He did it perfectly.
Hmm.
And that was one of the better plays I'd seen from Brewers third baseman, in all honesty. That was a ridiculous play. And you talked about the Mets series, seeing some of the throws he made. I knew he had a better arm than what scouting grades were putting on it, just based on watching him a few times. It was like, no, that's
Yeah.
not a below average arm. At the very least, it's an average arm that's good enough to play third. Compare it to like Andrew Monasterio over there, and it's a cannon of an arm. Like
Yeah.
Monasterio just continues to look a little out of place in this roster now, which maybe we'll talk about that later, but I don't know where his at bats are going to come, honestly. I don't know that he's worth having around just to platoon against lefties every once in a while. But either way, Dunn's defense there was absolutely fantastic, way better than I was expecting it to be, especially since third wasn't really the position he had spent the most time at in the minors. It was mostly second base. So he's somewhat learning third again from way back when he used to play it. He's been impressive, and like you said, the at bats have been pretty good. A lot of hard contact. I believe I saw that only three Brewers had an exit velo or three exit velos over 107 so far. Yelich, Contreras, and Oliver Dunn. And
Love it.
there's real pop there. I think I mean, we'll see a homer soon. I think he's gonna run into one soon. He'll elevate a ball with some of this exit velo. But I will say the only thing that is giving me a little bit of concern watching him, he is whiffing on high fastballs a lot early on. And it worries me a bit that teams are just going to start peppering him there. I don't know that I can't find any data that says it was a problem in the minors. I looked into it a little bit, but it's also hard to get good like pitch data for the minors. So he didn't whiff and un or like in more than usual for a minor leaguer, but we don't know exactly what pitches he was whiffing on. He covers the bottom part of the zone really well. You can tell. Like I don't even know if he has swung and missed on a pitch down there. But the top, these fastballs seem to be getting on him a bit, and I think teams are going to start trying to go after him up there. So that's something I'll be watching just to see if he's able to make that adjustment and get on top of those. But otherwise, I mean, he's been really good. You can see why the Brewers were excited to add him as a guy who was a Rule 5 eligible person. Like they clearly wanted him. And we talked about it at the time of the trade. We were both just from our initial reactions. I was pretty excited about him. I liked him a lot. You like to swing right away, which is always a good sign. It I think there's a pretty good chance he's an everyday third baseman if that upper part of the zone doesn't become an issue. Then it could become hard because pitchers have gotten really good at exposing that upper part of the zone and using it to their advantage. So if you have that hole in your swing these days, it's really hard to actually like be consistently competitive in the box. But we'll see. It's been 3 or 4 games that he's played in, so we can't take anything from it. Just something I noticed a little bit from watching.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, we talked about Turang. Neither of us are still. I will say I have a slight bit amount of more belief in his bat right now than I did. Not necessarily because of the results, but because of him being able to get on time with fastballs a little bit more. still not great. You can tell he's still kind of feeling for them, but he does have good bat control. And if he's able to just kind of flip them out to left for hits, that's fine. I mean, you're not getting the value from Turang doesn't come from the bat. The bat just needs to be good enough to not kill the value. That's really what it comes down to for Bryce. Like the defense is ridiculous. We talked about the play he made up the middle. He made a couple other plays that are not many second basemen get to or can make the play on with the arm. I still don't think he really has a shortstop arm, so I'm not sure I ever want him to be a shortstop, but I'm starting to believe more that second base might actually be a thing that he can handle because the bat just needs to be decent enough to get on base a lot to steal a bunch of bases. That's all he has to do to be valuable on offense, and then the defense will carry him a lot. So again, early returns here, but a little more hope for Turang's bat than I was expecting to have after the first couple series. But we can move on quickly to game two of the series. Obviously, not the Brewers weren't going to go undefeated, unfortunately. The pen was feeling like they were kind of on the verge of getting blown up a little bit, just with
Yep.
like the Mets game two was pretty iffy. Yesterday, they started putting themselves in trouble quite a bit. Or not yet. Well, yeah, it was yesterday, I guess. But game one of this series, opening day, home opener, they started putting themselves in trouble a little bit. You could see maybe some cracks starting to form. And in this one, it just kind of blew up. But I think the big news in this game was Jackson Chourio's first home run. And he went right center on a line. It was an impressive home run. He's 20 years old. Per Sarah Langs, he at only 20 years and 23 days old, he was the youngest MLB player with a home run since Juan Soto in 2018, which, by the way, Juan Soto was the first MLB player to be younger than me. So that was a weird that was a weird time for me in 2018, sitting there in college playing baseball and going, oh, Juan Soto's like playing in the World Series and he's younger than me. And yeah, anyway, but Chourio's the first one since him, the youngest since him, youngest Brewer since Gary Sheffield. And then only two other Brewers who were at that age or younger have homered, and that was Robin Yount and Daryl Porter. So I also saw he is the youngest Venezuelan player to ever hit a home run. And that includes a guy like Miguel Cabrera, who that's hard for me to believe because I always figured Miggy, I knew he was up really young. I thought he was actually in his teens when he came up, but I guess he was about 40 days older than Chourio's right now. So that's, I mean, he really has had a better start than I expected him to have. Now, I think we got to point out, Gunnar, there's been some luck. Like he's been pretty
Yeah.
lucky on some of these hits. His average exit velocity coming into today was 78. Average exit velo is not that important because it takes your absolute worst and factors that in. And especially early in the season, that
Yeah.
factors in
Early in the
quite a
year
bit.
for sure.
Yeah. Even then, I would still take more like what matters more to me is like your 90th percentile and like your top 50. Like that's what is indicative of what you're capable of as a hitter more than anything else. But he was using his speed in a lot of like he had two infield hits, maybe three infield hits before this game. Um, but his speed is ridiculous. I mean, we didn't even talk about that in the Mets series, but you talked about he did steal the base. He was over 30 feet per second on his sprints to first base. Just he's very fast. One of them looked like a routine grounder to third base, and he beat it. And it was not even all that close. And it's as a righty, like that just doesn't happen in MLB very much. Um, but then you see the power, and the power is still growing. I mean, he's got more in the tank as he gets older here, but to be able to go to right center, not not in the dead heat of summer in AmFam where the ball will carry when the panels are open and stuff, like the roof was closed, the panels were closed, the ball wasn't carrying any more than normal, and he just smoked the ball to right center. So it was very fun to see. Gunner, I mean, what were your thoughts watching the homer and just seeing? We'll talk about the reaction he got in the dugout too in a second, but yeah, it was that made up for this loss, in my opinion, was just seeing him get that out of the way, the first one.
Mm. Yeah, right center as a righty. I was trying to think of there's one guy obviously who I can think of who did that pretty consistently, hitting home runs that way, but I can't think of a lot of other guys that we've had who can do that even once in a blue moon, and he's going to be able to do that a lot. And I was asking you for comps on him because I really do not know. I think he's such a raw, pure hitter that it's just so hard to see what his ceiling is, what type of hitter he could be. I could see anything positive. This is like a good reaction I'm having. I could see the ceiling being anything for him, and it's just so hard to get a read on him in the best way possible because he is such a good hitter, and there is some luck to that, but like to that point of a good hitter, it's just like he's just putting good swings on balls, and I think he's just going to put himself in good situations a lot. I don't know what his whiffs are and anything. I know he's had a couple bad at bats, but I mean that's baseball. It wasn't like he's really whiffing on anything crazy. Um, that was maybe my one concern with him because he does seem like he gets off balance a little bit when I was watching him in the minors, but that's never affected him. That's just my own watching him. That was my one concern. But I was gonna ask you because you were in the game in right field for that this home open or the first home opener. We were questioning how maybe he would be able to handle right field, and we can see a little bit of shakiness on the camera on TV. Especially he had a play where this I think it was just this had to be the home opener where he threw it to third. Nothing bad ended up happening out of it, but he threw it to third. The guy bounced up to second. Normally, you'd want to hit the cutoff or just put that ball on second base just so you get another guy out of scoring position. So, um, partially maybe trying to show off his arm, being the young guy, knows he's got a cannon. Um, but maybe you wanted to have a little bit more IQ there, but also just in general, what did you see out of him in right field? Um, do you think he's comfortable out there right now, currently in game 5 of the season?
No, I do not. I don't think he's comfortable at all in right field. He's doing a good job of using athleticism to make up for bad reads and uncomfortable reads, but I guarantee you, and I hate to say this, but there's gonna be an error or a bad looking misplay at some point soon here. It's coming. Um, I I'll say this, and I may have said this at some other point. I don't understand why the Brewers cross-trained all of their outfielders except for Chourio. Like Frelick played right, left, and center throughout his minor league career. Mitchell played right, left, and center throughout his minor league career. Weimer played right, left, and center. Chourio played center, and then when he got to AAA, he played like 1 or 2 games in right, and no, one in right and one in left or something. He didn't play on the corners hardly at all, and it's it's an adjustment. So I just don't get why they thought that was a good way to, unless they were so certain he was going to be a center fielder, and then they got to spring and they're like, oh yeah, I mean the other guys are better than him in center, and that's more valuable. So maybe we do need to move him to a corner. I just think that there should have been some sort of foresight into that and thinking we should probably get him some reps out there just in case that's where he ends up being down the line. Like it was just weird to me. On that throw, like you said, I think that was 100% a young guy just trying to like make something happen that he wasn't going to be able to make happen. He the arm, we talked about this for sure last time, but the arm is better than what Grades had on it. Like he put quite a bit on that throw. It was just way up the line. It wasn't close. And I will also say, when he did the exact same thing in spring, you could see the difference between an infielder and Sal Frelick as an infielder there because Frelick tried to go like catch it and short hop it when they happened in spring, and Oliver Dunn just ran back 10 steps, caught it on a long hop, and knew nothing was going to happen then. So that is the type of stuff that, to me, when Frelick was playing infield, we had to worry about a little bit. Now I'm just going off on a tangent, but that is the type of stuff that like a new infielder has to learn by having it happen. So I thought that was an interesting way to look at it because it was the exact same throw, like to a T, down the line, short hopping if you tried to run and get it, or you could take the long hop like Dunn did. Um, but yeah, he's going to have a bad play and it's going to suck, and hopefully it's not in a huge moment. Um, but I do think long term he's going to be a very good defensive outfielder. I think he's just got to get used to it, and that's going to take some time. The other part of that is that he's never played in stadiums with third and fourth decks. Like the ball gets lost in the stands. I've always heard players talk about that. Like it's a way different feel in the outfield because before it used to just get up above the fans and you'd see the ball and it was just in the ball in the sky. And now there's a big row of lights with a bunch of fans and big windows and stuff in a place like Amphab, and it does make it harder, I think, to get a read than you were getting in the minors. So it'll come. That's probably the thing that's going to maybe be up and down the most this season, I think, is him as a defender. But like you talked about with the bat, even the single he hit in the home opener, we didn't talk about it, but the first run of the game, bases loaded. He comes up first at bat at home as the big star prospect. He got kind of a standing ovation. First pitch, way below the knees, called a strike. Like not even close. A cutter well below the knees. So what does he do? They throw the exact same pitch and he just goes down and gets it and hits the ball to right field for a single. Like that to me is that's extremely impressive for a rookie in that moment to not think, oh, I got to swing out of like, you know how easy it would be for no one would blame him if he went up there and just tried to hit a home run in that spot. Your first major league at bat in your home stadium in front of your home crowd with the bases loaded. No one would be upset. I mean, they would be like, oh, that's not a great approach. No one's going to be mad at the guy for doing that. He went up and had it just gets a terrible call to start the at bat and then same exact pitch and just goes, all right, well, I got to swing at it. I'm going to hit it to right for a single. So I've been impressed even more than I expected to be early on. There's going to be some struggles here soon. I think there has been some luck, so that's going to come back around at some point too. But he's he's been everything you could hope in the first 5 games um, for somebody dealing with as much pressure and expectation as he is. We'll see how it goes after this, but it's been a fun start. We also got a Rhys second homer of his Brewers career in this one. Absolutely crushed it after a fantastic play by Joey Ortiz. That was honestly that might have been the best
Yep.
play of the season so far. Um, I don't know why
Defensively, yeah, for sure.
I don't know why Manuel Margot bunted in that spot with the bases loaded and 2 outs, but to come in and pick that backhanded and make that throw with that much on it, I didn't think there was a shot at an out as he was making that play. And then I honestly kind of thought the Brewers might have got one because I'm not totally sure he was actually out at first. I thought his heel might have been on the base, but
Yeah.
I'll take it. It was an incredible play. And then that led right into the next pitch or 2 pitches later. Rhys comes up and hits his homer. And I kind of felt like we were about to be 5-0 at that point. But obviously, Yoel Payamps and Hobie Milner both kind of looked overused and tired when they came into this game. Velo was down for both of them. I, I don't want to say overused, but for this part of the season, it feels like they've been used too much already. Um, Later in the season, 3 games in 5 days for a pitcher, like that's not going to be that big of a deal. But this early, it's just you don't get as many up downs. You're not as used to that stuff. So we can talk about that next, Gunner. But did you have anything? We then the game really got out of hand when Bryce Wilson gave up a 3-run homer. Felt like he actually kind of jammed um, the catcher. I can't remember his name now, Jeffers, but just barely snuck out to left. But Gunner, did you have anything else you want to talk about in this game before we kind of talk about the pen management and all that stuff?
No, I mean JB came up obviously with Megill passing out. Unfortunately, he looked pretty good. You know, he was a guy who's going to be fringe on the roster anyways, and he was able to great that we had him because we needed a fresh arm clearly. But that'll probably relay us into this conversation that we already had pre-planned, regardless of pen management, coaching in general, how we feel about Pat Murphy. I think I was already mentally preparing for a discussion like this before we even had this idea. I see a lot of, I think people always tend to think of baseball managers a little bit differently than, or they think of them the same as other sports when I think it's a completely different type of game. So I'll lead us into the bullpen why it is, but I feel like a manager is literally a manager of talent. Like you're managing what you have on the field. It's not like a basketball coach where you're drawing up plays or you're setting up defensive sets. It's just what do you have? How do you manage the talent? It's like a game of chess, really. So that leads us into the bullpen management, which is definitely a super hot topic right now after these 5 games, and we're coming off a game where you blew one and with one of your better pitchers, and especially with Devin down, um, that's that's what happened. And I think part of it to me is the starters not going far into games, which is going to put you already at a bad spot bullpen wise, regardless of whatever happens. Who you put out there, it's going to be tough. And then obviously, who do you plug in at what times is the other part of it. And I know you'll agree with me on this part. Maybe this is where I'll segue to you is Craig was flawless in that aspect of putting guys when they needed to be, and they're always fresh for the most part. Which is another thing that I think fans like to now have 2020 vision on it to say, oh, Craig was perfect at this. Well, why is Pat not this? And um, I remember a lot of people complaining when certain players were pitching in certain games when we're winning and saying, well, why aren't we going for it? The game's in our hands right now. We should be throwing out our best guy. Well, you get a situation like this where you got Piamps throwing, what was it, 4 out of 5 games,
Yep.
and a game where you have the win in your hands, up 3-1, and he looks not good at all because he's overused or maybe tired or whatever the case may be. So, Spencer, I guess, how would you maybe have handled it? Do you agree with how it was handled? Um, just maybe Pat Murphy in general, bullpen wise, how are you feeling?
Yeah, it's hard because most of the time what you rely on is whether your pitcher tells you he's good to go or not. Like that's a lot of the the equation is that a pitcher is going to tell you whether he's good to go or not. And obviously Payamp said he was. The velo and some of the stuff just in general seemed to show that he wasn't. But to me, I guess how I would explain it, and I was talking about this in a group chat earlier today, but sometimes you got to be willing to let your B bullpen go out there in a close game or in a winnable game and hope that they do the job and that they get through it and that they do the job that your A bullpen would have done. And like you said, I think Craig was really good at that, and he was willing to lose a game or two because of it. And over the course of 162 games, you have to make some decisions like that. So far, it's felt like Pat is very much going after each win when it's in his hand, and it's understandable, and especially early in the season, and they have an off day tomorrow. I'm sure he was thinking like, if we can just go get this win, we got a day off, everyone can get rested up. Like, I understand that fully, and hopefully that's what it is. We have a stretch of a lot of games without off days coming up after this off day um, tomorrow. At that point, he's going to need to be willing to put a Thiago Vieira out there in a close game if Piamps has been used 3 out of 4 games, or if Abner and Hobie and all these guys have been used a lot in a span of a short amount of time. You got to be willing to go put out Bukauskas in a close game. Now he pitched in this game, so that's not maybe the best example, but to me, it felt like Vieira probably should have been in at some point during the earlier part, and especially for Piamps, it felt like, or I would have maybe just gone to Bryce Wilson right away because he can go multiple innings. He obviously didn't end up getting the job done himself, but those were partially Piamps's runners, I believe. So it it's not as simple as it sounds at times, but there you have to be willing. To me, that's what it comes down to. And yes, I think Craig was very, very good at that. And I don't want to praise Craig at all. I don't like the guy, but he was very good at that. And it made a lot of fans mad. And I remember people being upset about it. And baseball is a marathon and it's not a sprint. And I know that's the most cliche thing people say about that season, but it is. And you have to be able to be willing to sacrifice some of the early games. You're not even sacrificing the games. You're just putting a little bit less of a likelihood of winning by doing it. And the Brewers B bullpen would be a decent bullpen. Like it's not a bunch of guys who are just complete and utter garbage. Like they have good arms down there. So I don't want to make this an indictment on Pat Murphy already as his pen management. But I do think, like you said, that the starters aren't going to go super deep in most cases. And that just means you have to be willing to use your entire pen throughout the course of these stretches. And hopefully it's something he can learn from a little bit. Maybe it really wasn't even anything and Piamps just didn't have his good stuff today or felt a little off when he actually got into the game. Like, who knows? There's a lot of stuff that goes into it. Like I said, the Brewers know a lot more about if a pitcher's ready or not than I do, but it felt weird that he was coming in to me at the time and then seeing his stuff and seeing him at 96, 97 the day before and 92, 93 today. That's a pretty clear sign that he was not right. So I don't know that there isn't too much more to say to that. I don't think it's something we have to watch throughout the season. We have no idea if this is how it's going to go all season, but it did catch my attention. But I think the only other thing I want to talk about, Gunnar, and I'll toss it to you here, but offensive strategy wise, So you touched on stealing bases. I think that's going to be a huge part of this team, and it should be. There's a lot of very, very fast players on this team, good base stealers. Frelick, Yelich, Turang, Adames stole a base. I know Jake Bauers got caught stealing a base. I actually thought he got a pretty good jump, and they made a perfect throw on that play. He looked like a capable base stealer to me on that play, so I wasn't too upset that he went. I think he's the only guy who's been caught so far on the Brewers, though. So they're like 10 of 11 or something through 5 games. I'm pretty sure we lead MLB right now in steals. If not, we at least lead the NL. We've only seen a couple bunts. They're pretty much all Bryce Turang. To me, the offensive strategy's been pretty sound so far from what I've seen. But Gunnar, what are your thoughts on how they're handling some of maybe the quote unquote small ball and that type of stuff?
Yeah, I love it so far. I think it's a great mix. I obviously love stealing anyways. I was a faster guy. I think you just need that mix of you're not sacrificing. I hate the word like small ball, like you mentioned, like Bryce Turang, if he's bunting for hits, I like that. Like that's positive. That's a positive way to use him. Because that's if he's not a great hitter. So if you want to get him on base and get those steals, that's the way to do it for him. Um, if Yelich wants to do it once in a blue moon, sure, I wouldn't want him doing it. That's probably the other side of the coin where if he's doing it too much, I probably wouldn't want that. But um, as far as just other offensive stuff, I guess the big one is going to be, I alluded to it in that game one of a platoon. Um, now that we've seen 5 games, I think what I've noticed is how I've sort of looking at it now, and I feel a lot more comfortable with it, is it's not so much a platoon. It's almost playing into not splits even necessarily, but results. So like we got a great example in this game today of Paddock. You would think, oh, we're gonna pack a bunch of lefties against him blindly because he's a righty. We got a lot of left-handed hitters. Why not? We throw just Sal today was the only left-handed hitter, right? So that's one guy that we threw out there because I mean, you could probably get into that as a pitcher wise. I know that we had a trouble facing whatever he threw because of lefties, um, which is a great way to look into it. And that's telling me that we're doing all the right stuff, looking into stuff, um, and doing the right things, and not necessarily. And then, of course, like the late game substitutions on defense and stuff, and when the plug and play guys, that's somewhat mixed into offense because you got to actually play that around the lineup and then who to have later in games. But yeah, I think that's given me some hope, I guess you could say. In a way, I love the way Craig managed. I can't act like I hated how he managed now, um, especially with hitters. But that was maybe my one concern. Even back then, if we had a podcast last year, I would have been saying that a lot. Is why did we just go blindly with complete splits? And I think this year, if we're looking into it more, and just seeing how what makes guys most successful against this pitcher, against what type of pitches that they have, whatever the case may be, I think we're going to be in a really, really good spot, especially with how many weapons that we've got.
Yeah. I mean, the main thing for me is that, like you touched on, a guy who his primary secondary is a changeup is built to get lefties out because it goes away from them. Like for most pitchers, a slider or a curveball goes away from a righty, and that's their best secondary. So that's why they do better against same-sided hitters. But a changeup doesn't, and Paddock's career numbers showed it too. He had a decently higher OPS against righties, or righties had a decently higher OPS against him than lefties do. So, like you said, I think that was one of Craig's biggest faults was just going blindly, going platoon on stuff. And it looks like there's going to be a little bit more nuance to it this year, and I like that a lot. I definitely enjoy that. Um, I mean, to me so far, it's hard for me to, it's hard to really judge them, but going back to the hire, there were definitely a lot of concerns I had. I am much less concerned about Pat Murphy. I think the Brewers can win plenty of games with Pat Murphy as their manager, and we'll see how some of it plays out. Maybe the Brewers start struggling. Maybe he starts falling into some of his old school habits and stuff to try and get him out. We don't know exactly how this is going to go, but the way he's starting the season is a lot more in line with how I would want someone to manage a team than maybe I was expecting when the hire was made. So overall, just been pretty happy with him in general. So hopefully that continues. And yeah, is there anything else you've noticed that you want to talk about with him?
Not with Pat. I mean, we could probably slide into specific players because I can slide into an offensive player right away here. And I tipped my hand a little bit earlier in the podcast, but Sal Frelick offensively, um, I think it went a little bit underrated of how I don't want to say he even hit horrible last year. He didn't, but he underperformed a little bit offensively, and there's a reasons for that to me, but the most concerning I think was just him not hitting the ball hard last year. I think went really unnoticed. Because I think he has great bat to ball skills, which is really good to have. And he, as you mentioned to me multiple times, he's hit the ball hard in the minors. So it's like it's there. We just need to see it. And we haven't seen it unfortunately yet. I think sometimes his swing feels a little choppy to me, which I don't love, but again, that plays into his bat to ball skills. So maybe it's a bad stretch again. It's 5 games. Like I said, I don't want to overreact to it crazy, but it's you got to look at it unfortunately in those 5 games. Um, he's averaging this almost the exact same exit velocity again in 5 games, I understand. But his max is 101 so far, which is a little low. And man, I just want to see him have a good stretch where he's hitting the ball hard because he does everything else so well. He's such a good baseball player overall. Just please hit the ball hard in the air, and you're going to be the perfect baseball player that I want to see. So, do you have any concerns with Sal? I know that he did get injured, quote unquote. He didn't. He got injured and didn't get injured. He tried to jump out of a wave a pitch, and then he seemed a little uncomfortable once he fell down
Yeah.
after that. I know you might have pointed to the back injury, maybe.
Yeah,
But yeah, what do you see with Sal?
there's been some rumblings of him having something he's dealing with, and then seeing him jump out of the way of that pitch, and then he was grabbing his back. The trainer came out to talk to him after
Hmm.
that. That worries me a bit that there's some sort of issue with rotating, which makes it pretty hard to hit the ball hard. Um, he does need to start hitting the ball hard. I mean, he's even only played 4 games. He didn't play on opening day, so
Sure.
it's it's a very tiny sample. He had he hit the ball hard in spring. He had a good spring. He looked he went from infielder to back to outfield. I think he got a little bit more on plane today with some of his swings, like you talked about. There was the choppiness. He had the cheap hit on a check swing that happened to roll out in front of home and he beat out to first. But he did have an actual hit to left field. That's the type of hits I think you can expect most of the time from him. But he is absolutely capable. I mean, he had 110-mile-per-hour exit velos in AAA. Like, there's a lot of hitters who don't get up to that type of exit velocity. And he's never going to be a big power guy, but I absolutely think there's double gap to gap power and some 10 homer power in there for him. And like you said, everything else he does really well. So I'm not going to hit the panic button on Frelick yet, but I do think it wouldn't shock me if we happen to hear that he ends up going on the IL for a stint or something, or that there's something bothering him that he's playing through. He feels like the type of guy who might play through injuries to a fault. I kind of think he did last year with his thumb injury, the type of guy who kind of refuses to come out of the lineup unless he just absolutely can't go. So hopefully the Brewers can handle it. He figures out how to handle what's going on, and hopefully we just start seeing some hits. But I have found it funny. I've heard like Rock today, like or not Rock. It was somebody on the radio actually, but somebody on the radio was like, we got to get Frelick going. Like he had played 3 games before today when people like guys, and then there's people who are like, oh, I don't think Turang will be this good all year, but maybe he will. It's like he's not going to hit 500, I promise. Like we got to remember how small the sample is. So we'll see what happens after this, but there are definitely a little bit of concern with Frelick at the moment for me.
Yeah, I mean, along those lines of Sal, and we've mentioned Garrett Mitchell coming back earlier in the podcast 4 weeks from now. Oliver Dunn playing well. It feels like that's the triangle of players where one of them will have to go. Um, Now, 4 weeks from now, a lot of time. I'm not saying Sal has lost his job. I'm not saying Oliver Dunn has secured his job because he's hit the ball hard. But I think we're going to be faced with a tough decision, and I kind of hope we are, because we're going to be in a good spot. I hope if Sal could be hitting really well, and you're going to be faced with a tough spot with Oliver Dunn. I'm just going to be very interested to see, um, because it really feels like, I mean, Blake Perkins you could put in there too. I guess he could definitely go down. Um, but it's going to be interesting to see which one of those 3 or 4 guys is going to get the knock once Garrett Mitchell comes back, because it seems like he's got his spot pretty secured.
Yeah, it will be. It will be. To me, it wouldn't shock me if Mitchell's the one out of that group, but it also wouldn't shock me if, well, we could see the Dunn issue with the high fastball. Maybe that plays out. Maybe Frelick
Hmm.
doesn't start going. Like, yeah, those three are definitely fighting for two spots once Mitchell's back. So you also never know what other injuries might happen in that time and what else. The roster might look different at that point, but at this point, yeah, that is going to be super interesting when we get to it. I guess the only other player, and this is very small sample size, because he's only played in two games, but Gary Sanchez, I was pretty excited about the signing. I'm not going to give up hope on the signing by any means. He looks, I don't want to accuse players of being like, he just looks out of shape. And I don't want to say it is because he was being lazy. I mean, he's had a bunch of injuries and stuff, but he just, to me, doesn't look fully ready to play in games right now. And it's clear they're avoiding him catching because they don't think he's ready to catch, I would imagine, because there's been a lot of like day games and stuff already. Normally, you would have gotten Contreras a day off and had him DH, and then Sanchez. Like today, in a lot of years, I feel like a Victor Caratini would have been catching today, and Contreras would have been DHing, and they didn't go that route. They still had Gary DHing, so that's going to be something I'm interested in watching. He's only played in two games. He doesn't look very in shape or comfortable yet. I wonder if they are considering putting him on the IL at some point here to just say like, hey, we got to get you healthy fully before we can put you in games. But then you just bring up Eric Haas, who can't be optioned back. Like I don't know if that's a great idea either. So um, I think the most ideal situation still would have been ILing him to start the year, have Haas on the opening day roster, and then you send him down when Sanchez is ready. But we're past that point, so it doesn't matter. I guess we didn't talk about it. Eric Haas did clear waivers and is in AAA.
Yep.
So we do have that depth, which is nice. I still wouldn't say I'm a huge Eric Haas believer, but it's cool that we were able to keep him after the hot spring, and maybe it does carry over if we end up needing him to make an impact this year. So, and obviously with Quero's injury, Nashville could use him because they were short on depth in AAA too. So, glad that worked out, but Sanchez is definitely what I'm going to be watching. I think there's the possibility for the guy to be a huge middle of the order power bat, especially against lefties. But right now, he just looks like the game is faster than he's ready for to me when I'm watching him. So hopefully that gets figured out soon. Hopefully he just needs some more reps. You never know. It could be right on the verge of getting comfortable. He didn't have that many spring training games or at bats. Like, could just be a little slow start, but hopefully we start seeing some things from him in the lineup because the swings have not looked good in the two games that he has gotten in. So those are, I mean, that's really all I had for player performance. We touched on all the guys I would have talked about anyway throughout the podcast. So yeah, if Gunnar, if you, well, you know what? Did you prepare a Brandon Brewer? Because I sure didn't.
Oh no, I didn't. I can go off the dome though if I
Let's do it.
uh
Let's do it.
I think we do. I'll say Chris Capuano because I don't know why that came in my head for that. I think we have we picked him yet?
No, no one's
Okay.
picked Capuano for sure.
Um, I was thinking of pitchers who were overrated in the 2010s or
Yep.
2000s.
Yep.
So he had a big win season. I remember that
I think it
everyone
was
thought he
18.
was, yeah, Cy Young Award, of course, winner. No, he had like a 4 ERA at best that season with that many wins. So, um, I remember him also part of that. I brought this up before. He was in a soap opera with JJ Hardy, and
Yep.
I that was the other thing that I remember. So I know I brought that up before. So yeah, that's all I got for Chris Capuano. Shout out to him, and the single season win record maybe belongs to him. I think it does.
It's got to be up there because it was 18 for sure that year. I remember that year, but um, I'll stick with a similar time starting pitcher. We'll go Dave Bush, guy who seemed to carry a no hitter into the seventh inning like every year once for no reason. He would always have like a couple of like really good starts. He was fine. Dave Bush was a fine pitcher. He also the winning pitcher, or at least the starting pitcher for the Brewers' first playoff win in 26 years in '08.
Absolutely. Yep.
I was at that game. That was fun. Uh, so and he's a pitching coach now. I don't know if he's still with the Red Sox or not, um, or if he's even hired at the moment, I guess. But he was the Red Sox pitching coach for a while, and definitely a name that like was rising in the coaching industry for a little bit. I don't know what happened. He might still be with them. I haven't paid too much attention to Dave Bush lately, but off the dome, that's what I got on Dave Bush. So, yeah, I mean, the 2005 to 2008 Brewer pitching rotation, that's what we went with for this one. So, if you are still listening, please like and subscribe on whatever platform you are on. Remember to follow us on Twitter at the Cream City Pod, and please feel free to leave feedback for us on how we can get better. Thank you for listening, and we will see you guys next time.
See ya.